Is your team really disengaged, or are they just starving to matter? Today on Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous, I'm joined by Zach Mercurio, author of The Power of Mattering. We'll uncover the hidden crisis behind disengagement and loneliness, explore why significance, not success, is the ultimate motivator, and reveal why human skills are the new superpower in leadership. Finally, some resistance against AI. This is not just about work, it's about meaning, belonging, and why you matter. Let's get on with the show.
Joseph Jaffe. Why does that name sound so suspiciously familiar? Maybe because your secret screen name is Not Famous for You? What do you mean by not famous for you, Joseph? Chris Hansen here of Hansen versus Predators. To catch a predator and have a seat with Chris Hansen. Now, Joseph Jaffe, I'm going to need you to have a seat right over there. I see some suspicious activity. Something about a television show, doing interviews, 200 guests, something like that. But Joseph, you are not famous. And the people on your show, well, they're not infamous like my shows. But remember, Jaffe is not famous. So let's keep it that way. I'll be watching and listening. Behave.
When it comes to chicken, I'm your guy.
Blinking.
I'll have what Joseph has.
Look, somebody's talking about you.
This is what we call the voice of God.
Popping.
Everybody just gets to focus on you.
Grab me.
Probably not the best thing for an introvert.
I'm asking for you.
Well, I like a good chicken sandwich.
Touch me. Hi, David. Comment.
Oh my God.
Like.
You're actually an identical twin.
Push.
Maybe I'll just ask Julie to talk about what it is to be
No.
an identical twin.
Pick me up.
No, you didn't.
Shouting.
Surprise! Jeremiah, just hang on a second. I just got a text.
There's an edit for your new opening, Joseph.
I feel really honored to have been here, man.
But by the way, you've done a masterful job. Seriously.
And it was such a joy.
Thanks, Joseph. It's an honor.
Good on you. This was a pleasure.
I mean, you are the prime example of how to pivot in this new environment.
I wish everybody gets an opportunity to interact with Joseph Jaffe.
Who needs Cameo when I've got my own personal Cameo? Welcome to another episode of Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous. And you know what? We're talking about leadership today. So if a leader's job is to create more leaders, as Tom Peters would say, then it's definitely not about us being famous, but maybe, I don't know, just maybe helping make some of our employees a little bit famous. And by the way, for those of you that read my book, Built to Suck, I actually said ban the employee, that word. What a terrible word, employee. Let's rather talk about talent. Let's talk about humans. Let's talk about human interactions. More on that very soon with Zach Mercurio. He is he Mercurial? I don't know. But he's certainly Zach Mercurio. He's written a book called The Power of Mattering. And I think this is a really, really important conversation. And I think we're having it at the perfect time. So he'll be on the show shortly. But as I've been doing every episode, is starting off with my why statement, which is, as a teacher, facilitator, and coach, I help high aspiring entrepreneurs, owners, and their leadership teams get unstuck, return to growth, and become forever changed. I started the show when people were stuck at home or stuck in general. And so obviously, if you're stuck, the best thing to do is to get unstuck. And if you like the show, please subscribe, bit.ly/subscribe to the show. When it comes to growth, I'm a business and leadership coach. And, as I always say, the idea about growth and helping companies grow or return to growth is, it's not always about market share and top line and bottom line. I'm sure Zach would agree. Sometimes it's about growing up. Sometimes it's about growth in terms of maturity, in terms of perspective, in terms of compassion, in terms of being able to really kind of understand what counts, prioritize what counts, and act accordingly. And finally, the book that I did write during COVID forever changed how a global pandemic changed my direction, my purpose in my life. And I actually start off this book by saying, if you were miserable in your job before COVID, why would you return to it as well? Why are people miserable? Why would you even waste one day or moment of your life when life is so short? The formula behind it is very simple. Amor, which is love what you do. Happiness. Veritas, be true to yourself, your purpose, having purpose in life. Why, right? Start with why. And then finally, vigor, endurance, stamina, energy, grit, resilience. Stay the course. You know, when the going gets tough, dig in and be able to kind of get to the other side. But now it's time for our seated soliloquy. And the seated soliloquy today is called Actively Disengaged. Now, you know, Gallup has done a whole bunch of polls, and Harris has done a bunch of polls about employee engagement and about really understanding that you have engaged, and then you have disengaged, and then you have actively disengaged. And there is a word that people use now to describe those that are actually and actively disengaged. And I don't want to say it because I'll get shadow banned. But Zach is smiling in the green room. He knows exactly what the word is. It starts with a T, and it has the word wrist in it. And you can add the stuff in the middle. And it's a very jarring word. And often when I talk about this with clients or you know, in an environment, they kind of bristle. They get very uncomfortable. It's a prickly word. You're like, wait a second. Why are you mentioning that word? Why are you actually comparing an employee to someone who is actively plotting to take down your company? And the answer is because the stakes are really that high. And sometimes you can be actually, when you're actively disengaged, the very thing, you know, there is a phrase in the book, Crucial Conversations, about this idea of silent and violent. And violent are the words you use, but silent, the silent assassin, is when we withhold, when we don't actively volunteer, when we have something that we know could be useful and we choose to hold back because we don't want to share, because we don't want to make a difference, because we're only focused on ourselves. The toxicity of what happens in an environment where you have actively disengaged will kill your company. And often what we do is we make allowances and we allow people to stick around and stay just because they're productive, because they hit their goals and their quotas, and we make excuses for their bad behavior. But remember, you might have short-term gain, but you will have long-term pain. I think you'd be surprised how many people are actually actively disengaged in your company. And today we have an expert that is going to bring this all to life and be able to put some color, some skin and flesh on the bones. I'm talking about Zach Mercurio. Zach Mercurio is a researcher, author, and leadership development facilitator specializing in purposeful leadership, mattering, meaningful work, and positive organizational psychology. He advises leaders in organizations worldwide on practices for building cultures that promote well-being, motivation, and performance. Some of his clients, perhaps you've heard of them, the US Army, USA Wrestling, JP Morgan Chase, Delta Airlines, Marriott International, and the National Park Service. He also serves as one of author Simon Sinek's Optimist instructors. Zach lives in Fort Collins, Colorado with his wife, 2 sons, and 2 adopted dogs, as opposed to 2 dogs and 2 adopted sons. I just want to make sure that I got that right. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joseph. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your soliloquy.
Well,
I
first of
enjoyed
all,
it.
So just to be clear, the dogs are adopted, the sons are not.
Yes. Yes, you got that right. You got that right.
Okay, just checking.
Thanks
So
for clarifying.
the first thing that caught my eye is this idea of being one of Simon Sinek's optimist advisors. Did I get that right? I have to find out more about what that means.
He calls them
Optimist
optimist
instructor.
instructors. There you go. Yeah, optimist instructors. I mean, and what we're doing is he's created a community of people trying to re-teach these basic human skills of care, of trust that have decayed over the last 50 years.
But this idea of calling it optimist, I mean, he could have called it anything. He could have called it a purpose or a why instructor. But clearly the word connects with me. Why? Because I started the show and I said it was about hope, positivity, and optimism. And my late mom, who passed away 2023, she started calling it HPO. And so that prompted me to say it's not TV, it's HPO. So optimism to me is fascinating. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Why optimism? Why is optimism above everything so important?
Well, we have to have a place to go, right? In my work, it's very hard for anything to matter if you don't believe that you can, do, and will matter. And so optimism is the belief that the future can be better and you have the agency and that you're worthy of making it better. And I think that's the pulling force. It's the meaning that pulls us forward. It's our bigger so that. I'm doing this so that what? So I think it's the harmonizer of our energy. What is our energy for? And it's that pulling force keeps us going.
And it is so powerful because whether we hold, I mean, of course, I've heard they say that the phrase is the darkest hour is just before dawn, and it turns out actually that the darkest hour is not just before dawn, actually scientifically, because it's starting to get light. But this idea of sometimes feeling so down, so depressed, hopeless, as opposed to hopeful. Optimism is really designed to help keep you moving, keep you plodding with purpose, to believe that there is something better in your future, and if you believe that, then surely then you believe that something matters. The question is, do you matter, and how do you matter?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about this, to do anything today, drink a glass of water, get up, keep moving, you have to believe at some small level that your life is worthy of the unrelenting energy you're about to give it. And without that energizer, that animating force, which is the belief that I matter for something, we tend to languish. The degree to which we feel that we and what we're doing are significant to something else, something bigger, to another person, is usually the degree to which we act like we're significant. When we feel that we matter, when we know that we matter, when we know that something matters, that we're a part of, we act that way. One of my favorite books is a book not even in the organizational psychology space. It's actually by this author, Lawrence Gonzalez. It's called Deep Survival. And he studies people who survived survival situations. And it's very interesting. One of the number one predictors of whether someone would survive a survival situation, being lost in the wilderness, for example, was not age. It was not physical shape that they were in. It was actually if they had something to get home to.
I mean,
and they thought about it, right? And if they had something, I need to get home because I need to finish this project. I need to get back to my kids. I need to get back to this person who needs me. It was this feeling of mattering that pulls the human body and mind through even some of the most difficult circumstances.
Well, I mean, the most obvious example, I couldn't help but just, I actually got goosebumps as you were saying that, but is Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. I mean, that is the essence. That is the essence of being able to somehow have that reserve and have that ability to get through. Maybe not maybe, quite possibly, probably one of the most horrific experiences anyone could have gone through.
And yeah, I love when he quotes Nietzsche. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how.
Mm.
But that why is feeling needed. I mean, to be needed by just one other person is what it means to be human. To know that your presence and absence means something to someone else. I remember when there's Viktor Frankl was going out into the fields. He didn't keep thinking about, oh, why me? What's wrong with me? He started thinking about, how can I get back to my wife?
So
She needs me. And that essence of knowing you matter to someone else, especially that you matter to others, that other people would notice if you were gone, that other people benefit from your being in some way is the animating force of being human. There's a philosopher at NYU, her name is Rebecca Newberger Goldstein, and she calls it our mattering instinct, that it is built into our very survival mechanism, just as sleep and eating are, to matter.
I mean, there's so many places my mind is just ping-ponging. One is this idea of when we talk about depression and the most tragic of all, which is suicide. There is this common belief, which is the world would be better without me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That I don't matter, that I'm insignificant. And I mean, that's at the core, right? It's this, when you said, would I be missed?
Yeah,
it's
and
hard to think
there's
anyone
actually
could even believe
there's
that.
researchers, Gordon Flett, he's a psychologist. He studies the concept of antimattering, and he cites a study of a Reddit subthread on people who are considering self-harm, and they did language modelings and looked at over millions of posts. And one of the things that was common in almost 80% of these posts were some version of, no one would miss me if I was gone. The world would be better without me. There's a psychologist, his name was Kipling Williams. He wrote the book called Ostracism. And ironically, he was studying ostracism, and he was on sabbatical in Brisbane, Australia. And his condo that he had was next to a woman who was a prison psychologist. And she came home and she relayed this story to him, that there was this very odd situation. They found a prisoner who had escaped that day and was out on the outside of the fence. And he was just standing there picking up trash. And then he just sat down. And the guards were very confused. They went up to him and they pulled him up and they said, what are you doing? And he said, I just wanted to see if I existed. Because no one in prison saw me. No one talks to me. No one looks at me. And so what you said earlier about the actively disengaged, I mean, one of the things we have to think about is that lots of times people who act out in actively disengaged ways are our own creations. Because when people feel that they don't matter, when they're unseen, when they're unheard, two things typically happen. And you mentioned this. They either withdraw, the quiet quitting. Do you remember that? Quiet quitting was a term coined by a career coach on TikTok who said, hey, if you don't like your job, just do the bare minimum just to get by. And that advice to do the bare minimum in your 1/3 of your one waking life went viral, which we should all be very concerned about. But it wasn't because of a lazy generation. It was because of a generation who feels insignificant. Quiet quitting is the inevitable withdrawal response of our energy when we feel insignificant. Or, and you mentioned this, it can be much louder. When we feel that we don't matter, we act out in desperation. Martin Luther King Jr. said that protest is the language of the unheard. Complaining, blaming, gossiping, a lot of toxic behaviors we see in organizations are actually the manifestations of people who perpetually feel like they can't, won't, and never will matter. And so we tend to learn helplessness from our environment. We learn hopelessness. And individuals, an environment, and the relational environment around a person is always an accomplice to behavior.
I couldn't help but play around with this idea of matter and antimatter. As it related to mattering and anti-mattering. There's some fun to be had there, but let's talk about.
Yeah, and you know what, Gordon Flett with anti-mattering, he coined it because of Paul Dirac, the physicist who coined the term antimatter. because it has the opposite invisible charge of matter, but it's often invisible. So like it's often the very small things, the eye roll, they're forgetting someone's name, we don't have the budget for that idea, the don't forget that you're replaceable statement that the manager says to somebody. It's these little, like, often invisible, insidious things that over time add up to creating the conditions that we say we don't want, where people are acting out in withdrawal or desperation. So I like that. I like playing with that too.
Well, there's of course this idea, and I was going down the Mercurio rabbit hole, which I was thoroughly enjoying today. This concept of being irreplaceable, because we've all been told or taught that no one is irreplaceable, and almost to have this mindset to not get, to stay humble, or to stay on your toes as an employee, because no one, no matter how talented you are, or how senior you are, no one is irreplaceable. And you're saying something different, and you're saying, and clearly what you're not saying is create the comfort and the kind of ability to rest on your laurels. You're saying something else.
Yeah, I mean, skills and the ability to do a job, that's replaceable.
Sure.
Joseph Jaffe is not replaceable. Like, your unique strengths, your unique gifts, your unique perspective, your unique purpose, your unique impact, the way you show up, the way you've interpreted the world, out of the billions of computations your brain could have made of it, is not replaceable. Human beings are not replaceable. And this notion that it's somehow motivating to a human to be told that they're replaceable is asinine, because when you look at the psychological research, I mean, my favorite experiment was in 1913. There was this French agricultural engineer named Max Ringelmann. I love these early 1900s like ad hoc experiments. And what he did is he had some students of his pull on this rope as hard as they could, and he attached it to a dynamometer. It was a device that measures force, and he had individuals pull on the rope as hard as they could. And then he put those individuals into groups and had them pull on the ropes. And then he added up. It was very simple. He added up the total force. So the total force readings of all the individuals added up, and then the total force readings of the groups added up. And, who do you think exerted the most total force? It was the individuals every single time. Most people say it was the groups. It was the individuals. And why is that? Because the individuals knew that their effort was indispensable. It's called perceived indispensability of effort. When people feel replaceable, they tend to act that way, right? When people feel irreplaceable, they tend to act that way. They tend to show up and commit. It's like if I were to ask you to go to a dinner party tomorrow night, and I just said, hey, Joseph, you want to go to a dinner party? And you were just being nice. And you said, yeah, sure, I'll go. And then tomorrow you wake up and you don't want to go anymore because you don't really know who I am. How easy is it for you to get out of that plan? Very easy. There's no emotional labor at all. But if I were to say to you, hey, Joseph, I need you to bring this dessert tomorrow to my dinner party. Will you come? And you say yes. And then tomorrow morning you get up and you say, I don't want to go to that dinner party, but Zach needs me to bring dessert. How much more emotional labor is it for you to say no? It's hard because we're committed, we're attached, we're interdependent, we're needed by someone else. And I'm not asking you to like psychologically manipulate people to attend your dinner parties or come to your meetings or your job. But what I am saying is that when people feel replaceable psychologically, they will act that way. Do not be surprised if someone goes up the street for an extra $25 on the hour if you tell people that you just need more warm bodies in here, or you tell people that anybody could do this job, or you constantly say people are just here for a paycheck. When people feel like a cog, a replaceable cog, they'll act like it. They'll drop out of the machine at the first chance that they get.
I was smiling throughout because I actually teach about the Ringelmann effect.
Beautiful. Yeah, so sorry I over-explained that to you if you already knew that.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I've been teaching it slightly different because some people will refer to it as social loafing, the phenomenon of social loafing. But I have a slightly additional take on it as well. So you've actually brought me a complete new texture. So that's why I'm just loving it. For me, it also...
Well, good. I will say one thing that we did is it was never called social loafing by Ringelmann or the psychologists after. Psychologists to sell books, they try to sell you a psychological concept that helps you blame others. Seriously, so social loafing, like, why are there slackers in my group? But the mechanism for the slacking is that people feel like their effort is indispensable. And we can't forget that.
Well, you've gone into the root cause, right, and or the root motivation. No, where I've actually gone with Ringelmann is in context of delegation and being able to be very clear about who does what, and that people have a role and therefore ownership. But also sometimes one of the biggest challenges, especially in larger companies, are large meeting sizes and leadership teams that are not necessarily there because they need to be there, but because someone might be butthurt or there is nepotism or politics. And so you end up with too many people around the table, too many people in a meeting. And so ultimately when because it's all the same thing, right? At the end of the day, if I don't feel like the median voter, well, not the median voter, but if I don't feel my vote makes a difference, then I don't have to show up. I don't have to vote. I don't have to take it seriously. So and the next thing I know, someone's just got elected and was like, how the hell did that happen? It happened because you didn't understand the power of you as an individual to contribute. And you put it on everyone else and you made it their problem as opposed to yours.
Yeah, that's huge. And I would say that you talked about delegation and you talk about tasks. There's one of three things that usually happens when a leader comes to me and says, Zach, my people are not motivated to do this. It's usually never a motivation issue. It's one of three things. One, they don't understand the significance of the task. Like, they don't understand how it actually impacts another human being. The second, though, is they don't know why it's necessary. So they really can't. And I will ask people, I'd be like, hey, okay, write down why this is necessary. And oftentimes there's a lot of blankness. No one's communicated that. No one's shown them that, why it's necessary. And the third is they don't know how their unique strengths and talents are needed to do this necessary task. And those three things are like the key predictors of what makes a meaningful task. But most leaders delegate things by saying, I need you to get this done by this time, by this date. This is how you need to do it. But they don't really show people the significance, show people the necessity, show people how their unique gifts and inputs are needed. The second thing you said is meetings. I had a leader recently who said, Zach, we do remote meetings and no one puts their camera on. And I said, okay, send me the meeting minutes. I'd love to see what you all do. And it's just an update fest, right? It's update. It's exchanging information. I am not needed there for information exchange. I can get that through an email. I can get that somewhere else. So, for example, if you manage a remote team and you want people to turn their cameras on, you got to make it worth it for them to be there, and to talk about things in which their voice and perspective and purpose and strength are needed in the conversation. And so there's a lot of these little practices that over time, let's go back to your soliloquy, that over time, if I go into work every day and I'm part of these meetings where it's just exchanging information, where I feel useless, where I'm getting tasks that I don't know why it's necessary, I will start to believe that what I'm doing is not significant. And it's almost impossible for anything to matter to someone who doesn't believe that they matter. Our disengagement crisis is because we have obsessively tried to get people to care without doing the rigorous work to make sure they feel cared for. I mean, that's really at the root of our disengagement crisis.
Yeah, I mean, that was you hit the nail on the head, because the example that you talk about is the NASA janitor, replies to President John F. Kennedy's question, "What do you do here?" And he says, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." So that's great and all, and we all want that, but what you're saying is it's all well and good, to kind of have that aspirational, that container, but there's got to be some substance to go into the container. There's got to be you've got to be able to walk the talk. There's got to be that authenticity and delivery and follow through. Otherwise, it's just words.
And there's got to be skill. So I actually use that. I'm sort of embarrassed that I used that anecdote in my first book. because it sounds nice in a TED talk. It's like you could say, oh, you look at this person, he found his purpose and be purpose driven, start with why, all of that. But there's much more rigor that went into that. I mean, there's a study by Andrew Carton at the Wharton School that I discovered a year after I published my book that I wish I had discovered. And he studied how NASA actually created that sense, that feeling. And what he found was very interesting. On all the when he looked at meeting minutes, he looked at photos of NASA facilities during that time. And you want to talk about a management challenge. Everybody talks about, Zach, I have so many people to manage. I can't do any of this. NASA had 300,000 contract workers working on a mission that no one knew whether it was possible or not. And you had to get, and many of them would not be contracted with NASA when it was finished or not finished. And you had to get those people on the same page. And one of the things that Andrew Carton found that all NASA managers did, the practice that he observed, was they all had these ladders to the moon for their work groups. At the top of the ladder was to put a person on the moon by the end of the decade to advance science, that big purpose. But at the bottom of the ladder was that group's task input for the month. And the next rung up on the ladder was the tangible, measurable objective that task was needed for. The next rung up was the tangible, measurable objective that task was needed for. And they could see, they didn't just say, hey, you matter here. They showed them exactly measurably how they mattered. And it was scrawled on the blackboards. And they had to do what was called stepping stones to each other. So different units had to describe their ladder to one another in these meetings, how each task made someone else's job possible. And the reason why I think that's so important is that it's nice to say, oh, yeah, we have a big purpose. But it takes work, it takes rigor, it takes the skill and practice and consistency of a skill like laddering to make sure people see that purpose every day. And so this is why I always say that the practice of showing people how they matter takes skill, and skill that we must learn, evaluate, hone if we want this to come to life. But I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people like that story. We like these anecdotes that make us feel good. Oh, we can just give them a purpose statement and they'll be motivated. No, you have to do the work to make sure they can visibly see measurably how they and what they're doing is needed every day to something bigger.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great anecdote and a great story, and I'm glad that you brought up laddering as well, because I mean, let's talk about some data points to give a sense of how bad things are or how dire things are. So these are my data points. So this is what I actually teach. That's part of our own curriculum, which are from the Harris poll, which is a third of employees don't, I know you know these data points, right? A third of employees don't understand the company priorities. So it made me think of this. I grabbed it while you were talking, right? A third don't understand company priorities. A fifth don't care. And 1 in 2, a half, don't know how their role helps those priorities. The exact point. They don't understand how they fit in and the difference that they make. And so now I'm going to contrast that with one of your data points, which blows me away, that in January 2025, for those of you that are paying attention, that's this year, we're not talking about 10 or 15 years ago, Gallup reported that employee engagement is at a 10-year low. This is the thing. 7 out of 10 are emotionally uninvested in their work. So this is the state of the workplace right now.
I'll add another one. There's a Work Human study that found that 30% of people self-reported they felt, quote unquote, invisible in work. 27% of that sample said they felt flat out ignored in their jobs every day. And there's 2 data points underlying that engagement data point. So we have to understand also what's been happening over the last 10 years. This is bizarre when you think about it. We've spent collectively $2 billion on engagement programs. There are over 100 validated surveys to measure engagement. We've tried well-being programs, DEI programs. We have invested in perks. Wages in the States have actually risen about 42% in the last 8 years, which is pretty good, even in spite of inflation. So people's wages are going up, perks are going up, and people are more disengaged than ever. We're also more connected than ever. We're on more platforms. There's 38 million people probably right now on the platform Slack as we're talking. We send more messages to one another, but we're more lonely and disengaged than ever. And why is it? Well, there's 2 data points in that Gallup survey that everybody should pay attention to. One is just 39% of that sample of 15,000. And I should say that a different way. 6 out of 10 people could not strongly agree that someone at work cared for them as a person. Okay, just 30% said that they had a manager who noticed and invested in their unique potential. So you couple that with the, I don't know how my work connects to a bigger priority. You couple that with the other data points that we shared around invisibility. And this is not something that can be solved through programs, initiatives, platforms. It can only be solved in interactions. This is an interactional issue. People do not feel seen, heard, valued, and needed by their leaders, by the people around them on an everyday basis. And so we're not seeing really an engagement crisis or a loneliness epidemic. It's really a mattering deficit. It's going back to the beginning of our conversation. That will to carry on isn't there for a lot of people. The will to commit, the reason to keep going. And it's very sad because every one of those data points goes home and they have friends and they have families and they buy things in our economies and they vote and they're part of our society. And imagine spending 1/3 of your one waking life in a place where you feel, quote unquote, invisible, ignored, uncared for, and like your work is futile. So I think it's a public health concern as well.
I mean, that is a really, really powerful statement. Every one of those data points goes home. And by the way, Zach, many of those data points that we're talking about are already home. They're working from home.
Right.
And so dealing with that. So let's talk practical and tactical. And first of all, I want to just make sure that people recognize these 2 very powerful ideas. One we haven't discussed yet. The first one is this idea of asking people, or at least being able to determine that they would say, at least one person here cares about me genuinely cares about me as a person, as a human. You can measure that. You can measure that. The other one is this measurable, or this metric of what you refer to as, that's because of you. That's because of you. Talk to us about that's because of you. Because honestly, I'm going to go back to my own clients and challenge them to put this on their scorecard, on their scorecard. And every single week when they have their meeting, which is not, by the way, love the concept, love it, this idea of an update fest, is to be able to count how many that's because of yous did you dish out this week. So tell people quickly what do you mean by, or what do we mean by that's because of you?
Yeah, I'll take a quick step back. I mean, one of the things that we've asked people, and where this comes from, is we've asked people, when you feel that you matter to a leader, what are they doing? It's to try to identify the behaviors and the skills that create moments of mattering. And I'll ask everybody listening right now, watching right now, when you most feel that you matter to someone, what are they doing? And chances are you're not thinking about a big award. You're not thinking about a pay increase or a promotion or a winning employee of the month. You're thinking about a small interaction, and a small interaction in which 3 things were likely happening. You felt noticed, so feeling seen and heard as a person, feeling affirmed, feeling like someone can name your unique gifts and show you the difference that they make, and feeling needed. And what we find is that there's these small turns of phrase that can happen in very micro moments that create a sense of mattering. And one of the things that our interviewees told us is some version of these 5 words. If it wasn't for you, right? If it wasn't for you, this wouldn't be possible. Humans are at their best when they feel relied on. So that it's because of you, being able to show people the difference that they make, is very powerful. But we often have more sentiment that we rely on people than actions of showing them. So everybody here, think of someone you rely on. And now think of the last time you explicitly told them. I'll be in a room of 1,000 people sometimes, and I'll say, hey, raise your hand if you can think of someone that you rely on in your life or in your work. Everybody's hand will go up. Keep your hand raised if you've told them in the last 2 weeks. almost all the hands go down, right? Because we haven't prioritized this as a skill, as a practice. And so turning your good intentions into good actions is powerful. And one of those phrases is, if it wasn't for you, this wouldn't be possible. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have made it through this week. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish this. If it wasn't for you, that person walking out the door of the store wouldn't have been smiling the way they are, or if you're working retail. If it wasn't for you, and showing people the downstream impact of their work that they often can't see themselves.
If it wasn't for you. So now let's go back to what I was talking about, which is you've got these two scenarios, but in particular, you have these people that are at home. Let's just isolate that and talk for a moment about the state of the union, if you will, in terms of people working from home, living in thumbnails. We've gone.
Living in
Think about it.
thumbnails, yes.
Yeah, we've gone from cube farms to thumbnail farms, right? So
it's interesting. We are in cubicles again. It's just
yeah, but they're now the size of thumbs as well. Often when I meet people now, I'm like, my God, you're taller than I thought, or you're shorter than I thought, because
I get that a lot. The shorter one.
So how do we what are some just like ideas of being able to deliver these micro interactions and have people feel more connected and that they matter when we're living in these now thumbnail forms?
Yeah, I mean, look, the data is very clear about remote work. It's not about where or when people work in general. It's about what they experience while they're working. Nick Bloom at Stanford finds that someone's experience working remotely has nothing to do with where they are. It has to do with how they're managed. And what do we mean by how they're managed? Well, if they're seen and heard, if they feel that they're valued, they feel that they're needed. But we have to understand the limitations of what happens when we use technology to communicate. All interactions remote tend to be shorter than they would be in person. So we have to recognize that we actually decrease time, because our interaction time, our socialization time is reduced because we don't have that in-between time. So your time, FaceTime together, is shorter. So we have to understand that. We also have to understand that when we are remotely interacting with people, there's an unnatural communication option. And that communication option is to click leave. I mean, on Zoom, there's literally a person running out the door in that button. So like, Joseph, if you're frustrated in this meeting and the meeting time's up, I click leave and I don't have to think about you again till next week. That's not normal. That's not natural communication. And so what happens is that we actually get skill decay from a social skills perspective, because every time I don't have to engage with you about your frustration, I actually lose the skill to be able to do that, which I used to be getting when I was in person. It's called social learning. So one of the things that's happening for leaders, I'm going to do two sides. Leaders, is there's skill decay of actually being able to see, hear, value, need another person, engage in discomfort, because we don't have to do it, because we can click exit. Now, here's what's important. There's something you can do about it. So for example, use different modes of communication and don't let things go unanswered. What I mean by that is that if I notice that you were frustrated and in that call, I can click leave, but I should pick up the phone and say, hey, Joseph, I noticed I was getting the sense that you're frustrated. Is that right? And just that extra micro moment of outreach, that bid for connection, can be very powerful in helping you feel seen and heard. I would also argue that we can optimize the in-between moments a little bit better. There's a composer Claude Debussy wrote, music is the space between the notes. And I love that because, when you compare it to culture, like music, a piece of music, the sound of the music, the feel of a note is not happened when the note is struck. It happens in between the notes. The same is true with organizational culture and team culture. The notes are the meetings, the rituals, but the in-between moments are where culture is formed. So when somebody comes on a Zoom call and you have an extra few minutes, instead of going to the initial instinctual reaction and hitting mute on your video and going to respond to more emails. This is an opportunity to say, hey, Joseph, I remembered last week you were nervous about that meeting with sales. I just wanted to check in on how that went. Or I remembered you were having trouble with this piece of equipment. Did we get that fixed for you? I just wrote that down. Or I remembered your kids started baseball for the first time this weekend. How did that go? What was that like? Just wanted to check in. And there's magic in being remembered. And what we find is it's in these very, very small micro moments, these in-between moments, the liminal space, especially in remote work, that culture is actually built. But too often we're in a hurry. We have a hurry addiction. We're trying to get to the next thing, answer the next Slack notification, answer one more email before we connect with somebody. And we sort of try to get out of this awkward liminal space of connecting that could be used, especially remotely, to build connections. So that's some of my recommendations.
I love it. And I just realized that subliminal is two parts. It's sub and liminal. I didn't realize there was such a thing called liminal. So now
And
I
you
do.
know what's interesting? Yeah, like liminal spaces are like doctors' waiting offices or empty hallways. Now, just think about an empty hallway right now in a hospital, and you will feel discomfort. Human beings are are uncomfortable psychologically with liminal space, with the in-between space. So, like the moment when someone comes in social, there's social liminal space where someone comes into a conference room and the meeting hasn't quite started. You know, someone always fakes that they have to go to the bathroom to leave because they don't want to do the talking thing. What I find is that really good leaders who are good noticers, they actually take advantage of the liminal space and they become comfortable in the liminal space and they use those transition moments as checkpoints. A lot of people say to me, Zach, I don't have time for this. I was like, yes, you do. You're already using your time, right? This is not about creating more interactions. It's optimizing the interactions you already have. You have thousands of micro interactions a day with your people. You're probably just using it to put your phone down and answer another email instead of stopping by and saying to someone that you remember this about them and you wanted to check in, which takes the same amount of time.
I love this concept of liminal space, and I'll actually, I'll give you the other slice of bread to make the sandwich, because
good. Yeah, give it to me.
Because right at the beginning you have that moment right before the meeting starts, and then you also have that time right at the end. And we have been programmed just to like boom, 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 boom. You go from like 25 participants to like 2. Everyone's just off. In the first second that they have, they're just out. Nobody says goodbye. It's so abrupt as well. And sometimes there's a moment of magic. Now, I've found it as well in terms of having conversations, interviewing as well, that when you stop recording, often that's when the magic happens right at the end. Somehow there's just one, or there's that. Sometimes it's just the power of saying, is there something I didn't ask you, or any final thoughts as well? And it's typically after you've stopped the note taker, the AI note taker, when the real magic comes out. And so in a way, what I'm thinking throughout this is that, first of all, your first point, which I found was very, very powerful, which is you have to earn the right for somebody to put their camera on. Don't demand it, earn it. Right? Like this concept of the commute. You got to justify the commute. You want someone to come into the office, justify the commute. It's on you, the employer, the leader. That's the one thing. But the other thing is the ability to actually create those moments within the meeting where people can feel seen and heard. And I'll say one more thing, which is the power. We're uncomfortable with liminal, but we're also uncomfortable with silence.
Yeah, and one of the things, you reminded me of a practice that we worked with this law firm. They actually, they work on the conduct cases in organizations, so like HR cases that get brought much further. And so they have a bunch of lawyers who all work remotely, and they all work on their own cases. So they're like naturally siloed. And one of the practices that we implemented is I just had the managing partners do these micro calls every week to every lawyer to just check in on how they were doing. And when we proposed the idea, everybody was terrified. All of the partners were terrified because they said, the first thing, if one of my lawyers sees my name come up on their phone in the middle of the day, they're going to freak out. They're going to be anxious. But then there was this collective pause. And someone said, "Isn't that the problem here?" And it is. And it hit me. I was like, if you think your people's first reaction would be anxiety if you called them out of the blue, that should signal to you you have a major problem. And it's not that you're a bad leader. It's that too many of your interactions are transactional. You're asking for something. You're telling someone what's wrong with something. They need to fix something, and not checking in on actually how the person is, how they're feeling about things. What are log jams they can't get past? How can you help? And so the first couple of weeks were terrible with this check-in process because everybody was freaked out. But then it became normalized, and people actually looked forward to these calls from their managing partners. And guess what? Can you imagine what that did to the culture? Like when I look forward to a call from a senior leader, I think people can experience that I think we should experience that every day. There's no other relationship in human life where it's acceptable to feel anxiety if someone contacts you.
And I'm going for I've been remiss in giving you air horns, but there's your first air horn, because I want to just double tap on this for a second. When you see someone calling you, right? Like, hopefully it's not your husband or your wife or someone like that. But at the end of the day, when a sense of dread or anxiety comes up, whether it's a client calling you, whether it's your boss calling you, our default setting is what's wrong, or what have I done wrong, or but the point that I'm picking up from you is it's a sign that that your interactions are too transactional. It's just a simple sign. And like, honestly, I think about it now. Sometimes I see a client calling me and I'm like, oh crap, are they going to fire me? Like, what's going on?
Yep.
And as opposed to, why not just reframe, which it turns out they're actually calling me because they need me, and they've reached out to me, and they want me to, and it's the truth, and so
so there's two sides to that. I like you brought on the
insane.
second side of the receiver of the call, right? But also, I'll ask leaders, I'll say, if you called your direct reports out of the blue, raise your hand if you think their first reaction would be anxiety. And a lot of them go up, right? And yeah, it's usually because it's transactional in nature, but I like the reframing that on the behalf of the receiver as well. But the reason why I bring that up is because that's a practice I think you could use in remote work. To do the micro check-in on just how things are going. If you're observing your people and you're, like you mentioned this earlier, but think about one action you could take is think about conversations you had last week, and think about things that were said that you want to follow up on. And instead of waiting until the next meeting, the note in your organization that you have with somebody, you call them and just say, hey, I was thinking about that conversation that we had last week. I just want to follow up on this. And you will be just astonished at what happens when someone knows that you were thinking about them when they weren't there. And that's really that foundation of being noticed, having someone pay attention to us, occupying someone's mental space when we're not there. I mean, that's, some of the best leaders that I've worked with, they are sort of rigorous about how they observe, note down the details of people's work and lives, and then share that back and follow up. I have one leader that writes down on the top of her one-on-ones, don't forget to ask about ... and starts every conversation with something she wants to remember to ask about. And those things just go such a long way.
The book is called The Power of Mattering: How Leaders Can Create a Culture of Significance. And I have to tell you, like, I'm going to devour this book. Although I've got to make sure that I get a signed copy, because it's so important. Here's something I picked up, Zach, when I was going and reading some of these articles as well. A lot of these techniques that we can employ or deploy with our people are, in fact, facilitation techniques. So mirroring, framing, reframing, tell me more, active listening. So many of them are exactly what we as coaches are trained to to do in terms of facilitation. And so what I realized is this is essentially an exercise in facilitation. And part of facilitating is that it's not about you. The answer is in the room, as opposed to the consultant who's going to tell you the answer. And so what I realized is this is just, in a way, facilitation 101. And maybe as leaders and bosses and managers, we need to be better facilitators.
Yeah, I love the root word of facilitation, facile in French. It means to make easier, easy. So when you do this, like, right, you're making the conversation easier. And one of the ways to make the conversation easier is to create the space where people can share, to make the space where people know they'll be heard, to create the space where people know that they have something to offer, that they're worthy and they're capable and they belong in the conversation. And as you said, that it's because of you that they know that their perspective and purpose and strengths are needed. And so those are all the tenets of facilitation.
There is a quote that we actually use from Napoleon that says, something along the lines of, there is no amount of money that would cause someone to lay down their life, but they would willingly do so for a piece of yellow ribbon. And I think that speaks to certainly, well, I mean, it speaks to, posthumously, but recognition, but there is an element of matter in there as well. It's not so much the recognition and the reward, but there is this element of knowing that you were needed, and that you made a difference and that you mattered.
That reminds me of one other leader in history that I'll just mention, Ernest Shackleton. And if you dig into his journey, he was the captain of the ship, the Endurance, that got stuck on a block of sea ice, slowly being crushed behind them. And he had this crew. And one of the first things he did in his diaries is he went around and asked people when their birthdays were. And he would write them down. And he would bring out stores of food and have these birthday parties on the ice. And then he also asked them who they missed from back home. And on Saturday evenings, while they were surviving, he would have them give toasts to the people that they missed from back home. He would ask them what their favorite sports were. There was this one crew member who loved American football, and he'd had this American football tournament on the ice with some bag of rice that they were using. But he found out what was important to his people, and it became important to him, and they were noticed. And I remember reading diary entries, because we were doing some research for part of the book that actually got edited out, but I was doing tons of research. I went down the Shackleton rabbit hole, and I found a diary entry of a crew member who said that was the best year of my life, barely surviving on the ice. And he wrote, "I would have followed him anywhere." And I think that loyalty, but he was a very quiet leader. He was a noticing leader. He took the time for what his crew members, what the things that were important to his crew members, he took the time to make them important to him. And he would also ask a question like, "What would you do if you were me?" He asked all of his crew members that question. And we typically read the HBR study on Shackleton or read the books, and we think, wow, what a tough, heroic guy this was. But in reality, he was committing to the practices of making sure people felt that they mattered in probably one of the most inhospitable conditions ever. And it goes back to what we were talking about with the Viktor Frankl, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. It goes back to just knowing that I'm needed, knowing someone has my back, knowing someone knows me. And when we know that, we can do really hard things.
One of the things that I wrote in one of my books was this idea of don't pay for attention, pay attention. And
oh my gosh, yes, that's so important.
Right, especially this idea of paying attention. I mean, it's again in this idea of I think it was in one of the articles of actually writing down all of these things in a notebook and referencing it and then being able to use it as well. The things that I do in the show, I didn't even have time to do, which shows that I'm having fun. Normally, I have a quote. So this is the quote that I found for you. When people are financially invested, they want a return. When people are emotionally invested, they want to contribute. I think you probably know who said this. This is Simon Sinek. So Simon. So looking
He
for
says
quotes.
so much. Yeah, but
He
that's
does.
it. Yeah,
He
that's
does.
it.
He
Yeah,
does. Now,
it's true.
now, if you've been paying attention, you would know that I would love to get Simon on the show. So, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to get no. Um, I I do something else as well, which is I do a little bit of fun facts, and this demonstrates to you that you matter. Because I took the time to do these things, but also I had so much fun with you that I didn't need to actually go to the fun facts. But I still want to show you what they are anyway, because these are the fun facts associated with Zach Mercurio when he's not going down the shackle hole or the Shackleton hole, or whatever we want to call it. From cube farms to thumbnail farms, these are the fun facts we found out about the curious case of Zach Mercurio. So the first thing we found out is that this man has a pet snake named Striker. Don't worry, he's nice. So we're using a bit of AI here as well, because the snake better not be this big. That's all I'm saying, because that freaks me.
It's getting there. He's a ball python. He's a year old. Well, we don't know if it's a he or a she, and if it's a she, we're in trouble because they get up to 6 feet.
Yeah,
But
and so
actually, my 7-year-old. So it's mine and my 7-year-old, but my 7-year-old saved his money up to get this snake, get the terrarium, set everything up. But then I became the caretaker. It's in my office. So he's nice though. He is nice, and I actually like the snake.
Yeah, well, we're not sure actually. Maybe you found him on one of your camping trips, because you do like to go on camping van trips with your two boys as well. So getting close to nature. And the third fun fact we found out about you is you have to read a physical newspaper every day. To which my question is, why? Tell us
I don't
why.
know. So I don't like reading on digital devices just because I'm on them all day. And so I have to read a physical newspaper, and it's before bed, believe it or not. It's a habit. Like, I have to do it. I mean, and I have to scan it. Because I think what I like about the physical newspaper is there's nothing telling me what to read. So it's one of the only purest forms of escaping the algorithm. I mean, there's some of that because an editor edited what's in the newspaper, but there's so many different things, especially if you have a good paper, to read, that I can escape the algorithm showing me what I should read. And I find the most interesting, odd things. And my wife is just sick of me saying, "Oh, I read in the paper the other day," and then divulging some useless fact.
So I used to get the USA Today. I loved USA Today when I was traveling, when I used to travel all the time. And it seems like it is a dying art as well. But I like this concept of escape the algorithm. You see, right at the end, like just this concept of escaping the algorithm. We are living through very difficult times and challenging times with respect to AI and automation and talk about people not mattering anymore. I mean, what can we do to buck this trend? Just final thought. I'll go a little over if you don't mind, but
I don't mind, because I actually think people matter more in the age of AI. I'm actually excited about AI because it's going to take away all the technical and operational tasks that we've been using as an excuse not to invest in humans. And so it is going to make the time and space for us to actually build relationships if we have the skills to do that. One of the limitations about AI that's really exciting for me is that it can never take moral responsibility for a task. It can do your tasks. It can't take responsibility for them. It cannot be accountable to another human being. It cannot care about or care for another human being. And so what's good about this is, what that means is that our ability to build trusting, caring relationships is going to be the ultimate differentiator if we reinvest and double down on these skills to care. So I think that people are actually starting to realize the limits of artificial intelligence. And you've seen it in a couple of profiles where ChatGPT, for example, or it could have been any of them, was not supportive of someone who was in mental distress, or took someone down a rabbit hole by telling them their ideas were the best ideas, and they got into a delusional rabbit hole. You're starting to see those examples right now, and people are realizing that the AI cannot care.
Those examples are actually quite literally in the news right now.
Yeah.
I will, I will lob it one more time back to you. And one of the things that we teach is the concept of Lencioni's trust pyramid, from vulnerability-based trust, healthy conflict, all the way up to shared results. And actually, my food for thought, my last thought, I'm going to go down another rabbit hole in a few moments by myself. But it's actually to really dig deep into that pyramid and focus less, I think, on the numbers and the ratings out of 10, but actually really to kind of like embrace the mess, the messy middle, embrace, embrace the transition, embrace the misalignment, even sometimes when some people are high and some people are low, and just go there and realize that pyramid, none of those elements are like fit into that algorithm. As you said, shared results, the algorithm doesn't care, the AI doesn't care. It's not about us, it's about me and my and I, right? Healthy conflict, it's the vulnerability based trust. What is that does not compute? Blue screen of death.
Yeah, the AI can barely acknowledge nuance. If you've ever like seen it try to give you a response, like the nuance, it can't even handle it. It distills it into bullet points and starts logically analyzing it. So that's why, I mean, I was really struck by the World Economic Forum's most in-demand skills by 2030 and their Future of Jobs report. And for the first time, human skills like empathy, compassion, understanding, curiosity have overtaken technical skills and operational skills for the first time ever. Why is that? Well, because if you do not know how to build a trusting, caring relationship, AI will take your job.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So that's I've had CEOs who say that AI could do make it better operational decisions than I can, but it doesn't have the people.
Well, it's the whole healthy and smart and the EQ component, right? And so I guess there's IQ, there's EQ, there's AIQ, but it's getting back to, maybe we'll call it MQ, right? Mattering quotient. And so there was definitely nuance in the last hour. Zach, if it wasn't for you, my Friday would not mean as much as it does. And it's been absolute pleasure, getting to know you, and specifically talking about this book. And this book truly, The Power of Mattering, this book truly does matter. And I'm going to be recommending it to all of my clients. You can be damn sure of that. And I never say that.
Well, thank you. And this was great. I love all the rabbit holes. This show is how my brain works. So I think
they call it ADHD,
everything. But we've connected everything from survival, how people survive in survival scenarios, Lencioni's trust model, Shackleton,
everything, right? I would say
all strung together by the power of human relationships.
Right, and I would say normally there's an app for that, but in this case, I'm going to say there's medication for that. We always end the show with Chuck Norris, who gives his verdict on whether, in fact, the guest mattered. And this is what Chuck had to say.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
And we will be back soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.